Okay, so I have not finished the eye on the left, but I do want to show you how to kind of start with the nose and start doing the nostril area. Okay, so I'm going to come back and finish the eye, but I did do a little bit of the area for the bridge of the nose. So at this point, you should have both eyes kind of shaded, detailed, and the areas around the eyes done. So obviously, like I haven't done this area. And then as you do the areas kind of on the inside of the eyes, it'll start to naturally shape the nose. Now, as you can see, he does have this very dramatic shaped nose. Most people do not have a nose this dramatically shaped. So please pay attention when you're drawing your picture what your shadows look like. So what we're doing here is we're focusing on the shadows, and we're really going to draw these shadows with our blending stump. So on my paper here, you can just use a scratch piece of paper. Don't do it on your actual drawing paper. I've made this kind of dirty smudge so I can get my blending stump dirty because I'm pretty much drawing strictly with the blending stump. Now you do want to erase the grid as you go, so I've kind of erased the grid in this area. Erase it a little bit more below the nose. You do want the grid out of the way, and you can't really erase it afterwards because it'll mess up your shading. So I'm just going to start paying attention to these shadows, and very lightly, I'm not even really putting any pressure on the blending stump because it has this graphite on it. I am kind of paying attention to where there's shadows. As you can see, it leaves some pretty dark marks. So if you turn your blending stump, you will get these darker areas. So like I said, I'm just using my blending stump, and I kind of just rotate it to get some of that graphite. So right now, I'm kind of getting some graphite on, blending it out a little. It's got this kind of shadow that goes along this way. And then there's the one that comes down here to shape the nose there. Depending on the light source in your image, you'll probably have one side of your nose that's darker than the other. My right side is darker than the left. If the light source is straight on, you might just have darker areas around the creases of the nose. Now I am going to use my pencil to kind of add some darkness for the nostrils, because those areas are pretty dark. And depending on your person, like my picture here that I have, his nostrils actually look really small. So, pay attention to how your person's nostrils are formed so you don't go overboard. Okay. So now that I've completed, for the most part, obviously this is like the first layer, I'm going to take my kneadable eraser, and there's like this little highlight down here that I want to get, and there is a highlight on kind of this side of the nose. So you're pretty much going to be coming in here and layering and kind of going back and forth between shadows and your highlights. Now I am going to take my pencil, and I am going to clean up that line right there because I do want it to be a little bit more predominant. A little bit of shadow here. Be very careful when you're working with a small blending stump because they do bend. If you're too rough, they will break and bend. You can still use them. They're just not as easy to use, so just be really careful. So I'm going to come back in here with my kneadable and kind of get some of these areas. And then I'm just going to kind of work on the other side now. Now this other side is darker, so I definitely will need more graphite on this side. And the shadow from his eye really comes down. Now you'll notice I'm pretty much doing a little bit of light blending pretty much everywhere because that does create that skin texture even when it's super light. We don't want just white paper. We do want a little bit of that skin texture. So now if you notice, I'm drawing most of this with just the blending stump. I'm barely using the pencil at all. Kind of has this like line that comes down. What's nice is if you draw with the blending stump, it is actually easier to erase if you make a mistake because everything is softer. If you erase or if you use your pencil and you make a mistake, it's a little bit harder to erase that. Now he's got some really dark shadows on this side, and I'm just going to kind of get them in place right now, and then I will come back and darken them up. So don't be afraid to darken some of your shadows, just do it gradually. So right now I'm paying attention to the shadows. I do see that there's a bright highlight right here and down here, and I will get those. I'm just kind of focused on a little bit more of the shadows right this second. Now you don't want your lines too hard because you don't want it to look like you have an outline. So you might need to come in here and actually kind of smudge those lines that you drew so they don't look. And you can switch between the small and the big blending stump. It really just depends on your person's face and the details. Obviously, if they have a really tiny nose because your picture is a little smaller, my picture is very zoomed in. Make sure you erase the grid as you go. I will do the mouth in another video. Just resketching it so I know where it's at. Remember, little circles do help to blend. All right, I'm going to come in here with my kneadable. I'm going to get some of these shadows, highlights. Oh, throwing stuff across the table. Like I said, this is just a layering process. So you go back and forth between shadows and highlights, using your eraser, using your blending stumps. So it's really just this process of back and forth of creating those shadows and creating those highlights. And you've got this highlight that comes in right here. And so you would just keep doing this. You would keep paying attention to your shadows and your highlights. So continue to work on like the area of the nose and around down to the mouth. Next, we'll do the mouth and we'll kind of work out towards the chin and kind of wrap around. So hopefully that helps.